All right, let's dive into one of the wildest Premier League matches lately. Chelsea pulling off a crazy 4-3 comeback against Tottenham at their own stadium. You sent us a podcast breaking down this match, and, well, it was a roller coaster, to say the least.
It was absolutely bonkers.
We're going to unpack it all for you, get to all the key insights, and you guys, this one had it all.
It did. It really did. It was more than just a match. It felt like a statement, where both these clubs are, the fight for those Champions League spots.
Okay, so the podcast sets the scene. Chilly December night in London. Spurs, under Ange Postecoglou, trying to keep themselves in that top four race. And then you've got Chelsea, led by Mauricio Pochettino. They're trying to close that gap on Liverpool, who are sitting pretty at the top of the table. The podcast even calls this match a potential turning point in the whole title race. So anything else jump out at you right away?
The narratives, for sure. Beyond the scoreline, you've got these two managers, very different philosophies, both trying to, impose their will on the match,
Yeah.
So it's a clash of styles as much as it is a clash of these two big clubs.
Absolutely. And speaking of clashes, the podcast doesn't waste any time getting right into the action.
Yeah.
Spurs came out absolutely firing. 5 minutes in, Chelsea's Marc Cucurella, he slips. Brendan Johnson picks up the loose ball, sets up Dominic Solanke, easy tap in. Just like that, 1-0. But they weren't done. Moments later, Dejan Kulusevski curls one in. Absolutely beautiful goal. 2-0 Spurs. I'll be honest, when I first saw that scoreline, I thought, oh man, this is going to be a blowout.
Classic Postecoglou, though. His Spurs teams, they're known for this relentless attacking, high energy, high pressing. Just the podcast called it smash and grab football.
Smash and grab.
Yeah, basically they overwhelm you right from the whistle, force errors, capitalize on those early chances.
Interesting.
It's high risk for sure, but when it works, it's so effective.
Okay, so break down this smash and grab thing for me a bit more. Is it just about those early goals, or is there like a deeper tactical element to it? Because it sounds like it could backfire pretty easily.
You're right. It's not just about scoring early. There's a whole system behind it. Postecoglou, he uses this aggressive high press. His players swarm the other team when they have the ball, trying to win it back in dangerous areas.
So they're forcing the other team to make mistakes.
Exactly. Rushed clearances, turnovers, and then, bam, quick counterattacks.
I see. So that's where the risk comes in then.
Yeah. If that press is broken, your own defense is wide open.
That makes sense. So how did Chelsea respond to all of this? Do they just crumble under that pressure?
Surprisingly, no. They weathered the storm.
Huh.
The podcast highlights how, even down 2 goals, Chelsea didn't panic.
Okay.
They slowly started to get a foothold in the match. You could see gaps opening up in that Tottenham midfield as their press started to fade.
And then, of course, the moment that really gets Chelsea back in the game, Jadon Sancho's goal right before halftime. Now, podcast mentions he's had a resurgence under Pochettino. What's changed for him?
It seems like Pochettino has really unlocked something in Sancho. The podcast doesn't get into specifics, but you can see it. His movement, his confidence on the ball.
Yeah.
He's not hesitant anymore, taking on defenders, making things happen.
Right.
That goal was a perfect example. Cuts inside from the wing, places it perfectly past the keeper.
Beautiful. So 2-1 going into halftime. The momentum had shifted, but I'm guessing Spurs still felt like they had the upper hand.
On paper, yeah. But you could tell, even listening to the podcast, the tide was turning.
Okay.
Chelsea had found their rhythm in Tottenham. They were starting to look a little rattled.
Interesting.
The commentator even mentions, you could feel the tension in the stadium building.
Oh, I bet. And then, right on cue, the second half starts. Spurs give away a penalty, and who steps up to take it? Cole Palmer, cool as you like, slots it home. 2-2, game on.
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
Right.
You mentioned Palmer's composure. The podcast makes this point that this penalty, it wasn't just about the score. It was a psychological turning point.
Oh, so.
Remember that smash and grab? Tottenham thrives on that early momentum.
Right.
That penalty, it disrupted everything.
Okay.
Suddenly the doubts start creeping in.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like that penalty gave Chelsea the belief that they could not just tie the game, but win it. And then, as if to confirm that feeling, just minutes later, Palmer takes a shot, it's blocked, falls to Enzo Fernandez, and he unleashes this rocket into the top corner. Chelsea take the lead 3-2.
Oh, what a goal. Pure power and precision, but it was more than that. It was a statement, The podcast replays the commentator shouting, "Chelsea have taken control." And they weren't wrong.
It's like a switch flipped. From that point on, Chelsea were dictating the pace, controlling possession, creating chance after chance.
And that's where Enzo Fernandez's influence was just massive.
Yeah.
The podcast mentions the goal, but his overall performance. Crucial to Chelsea's dominance in that second half. He was everywhere. breaking up Tottenham's attacks, distributing the ball perfectly, linking up brilliantly with Palmer and Sancho in the attack.
The podcast pointed out he completed 92% of his passes, and most of them in the attacking half. That's not just keeping possession. That's controlling the whole tempo of the game, pinning Tottenham back. But wasn't that a risky strategy, leaving that much space behind their midfield? That could have played right into Tottenham's counterattacking style, couldn't it?
It was a calculated risk, definitely. Pochettino clearly had faith in his backline to deal with, any potential threats.
Okay.
And he was relying on Fernandes to disrupt Tottenham before they could even launch those counters.
Right.
And, for the most part, it worked brilliantly.
Yeah, it did. Okay, so we've talked about Fernandes, but let's get back to Cole Palmer for a second. 2 goals already. And he wasn't done yet. Spurs, desperate to get back in the game. They're pressing high. And it leads to another penalty for Chelsea. How does Palmer respond? A Penanga?
Yeah.
Chipping the ball effortlessly past the keeper. Ice in his veins.
Audacious, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just about the goal, it was sending a message.
Like what?
The podcast called it a swaggering display of confidence. And it's spot on. It showed Palmer's belief in himself. And even more importantly, his belief in Chelsea's dominance. Like he was saying, we're in control here. There's nothing you can do.
Wow. It really was a coming-of-age performance from Palmer.
What did you make of Tottenham's response?
The podcast mentions Postecoglou making some substitutions, trying to change things up, but it didn't seem to have much effect.
Postecoglou's a manager that likes to stick to his principles, He believes in his system. He rarely deviates from it.
Okay.
But in this match, maybe he was maybe a bit too stubborn. The podcast highlights that even when Chelsea were clearly on top, he kept his team pressing high, leaving them exposed at the back. It was almost like he was trying to out-attack Chelsea.
Right.
Which, against a team with that much firepower, always going to be risky.
Yeah, could see that. All right, so 4-2 Chelsea. The match seems out of reach for Spurs. But even in defeat, they showed some fighting spirit. In stoppage time, Son Heung-min gets a consolation goal off a corner. It wasn't enough to change the result, but it did highlight something about Tottenham's mentality.
Absolutely. Son is a true leader. The podcast calls him the heart and soul of this Tottenham team.
Yeah.
You could see it even when they were losing. He never gave up, kept pushing his teammates, and he got that goal, which, ultimately meaningless for the result, but showed that this Tottenham team doesn't just lie down.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about those key moments, the individual performances. But let's zoom out a bit. The podcast calls this match a tactical masterclass from Pochettino. What impressed you most about his approach?
His adaptability. He recognized early on that his initial game plan wasn't working. Tottenham's high press was causing Chelsea problems. So he adjusted, dropped his midfield deeper, allowed Tottenham to have more of the possession in their own half, and then waited for the opportunity to strike on the counter.
Interesting.
It was patient, calculated, and it paid off big time.
The podcast also mentions that Pochettino's decision to give Palmer and Fernandes more freedom in the attack was also crucial. They were constantly switching positions, popping up in dangerous areas, just causing all sorts of problems for that Tottenham defense.
That fluidity was key.
Yeah.
Pochettino basically gave them a license to roam, use their creativity, their individual skills to unlock that Tottenham defense. And they did exactly that.
They did.
It shows Pochettino's trust in his players, his ability to get the best out of them. He's created an environment where young talent can really thrive.
So final whistle blows. Chelsea 4, Tottenham 3. Thrilling match, full of twists and turns, tactical battles, moments of individual brilliance. But let's not forget the context here. This wasn't just any match. This was a London derby, a clash between two of the biggest clubs in the Premier League. What about the atmosphere, the rivalry, the whole spectacle?
The podcast does a great job of capturing that intensity.
Yeah.
The crowd noise, the commentary, you could feel it, the electricity in the air. Okay. London derbies are always special, and this one, no different. Passionate, fiercely contested, that edge of your seat drama that you just don't get every match.
Exactly.
You could sense the history between these two clubs, the weight of expectation, that desire to not just win, but to really outdo their rivals. Yeah. And that's what made it so compelling.
It's clear this match will have repercussions for both clubs, not just in the league table, but also in their confidence, momentum, and the whole narrative that'll be built around them going forward. But we'll dig into all that in the next part of our deep dive. For now, let's just take a moment and reflect on what we've seen so far.
Yeah, let's do that. And it wasn't just about the points, was it? Beating a rival like Tottenham, especially after being down 2-0, That has to do wonders for their confidence.
Absolutely. But on the flip side, what does this loss mean for Tottenham? They came into this match trying to solidify that top 4 spot.
It's a blow, for sure. Their defense, well, their weaknesses were exposed. And those early goals, they really set them back. The podcast analysis, they think Postecoglou might be feeling the heat now. Remember we talked about his stubbornness with tactics?
Yeah.
Well, that might come under some serious scrutiny.
I think sticking to your principles is one thing, but sometimes you need to adapt, especially against a team like Chelsea. The podcast also mentions Tottenham have some tough matches coming up. So can they bounce back from this?
It's going to be a real test, a test of their character. They've got the quality in the squad, but they need to fix that defense. And maybe, just maybe, be a bit more pragmatic in their approach. The pundits on the podcast, they seem to think this loss could really derail their season if they're not careful.
Okay, so we've looked at that immediate impact on both teams, but let's zoom out even further. What does this match tell us about the Premier League as a whole?
It's a reminder, this league, it's unpredictable. Anyone can beat anyone on their day. We came into this deep dive thinking Tottenham might run away with it after that quick start.
Right.
But Chelsea, they flipped the script, and that's what makes the Premier League so great. Those constant twists and turns, the unexpected narratives.
That's why we love it. And honestly, after this deep dive, I'm even more excited to see what happens next. Can Chelsea keep this up, challenge for the title? Will Tottenham regroup, secure that top 4 finish? So many questions.
The beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
We get to watch it all unfold, and who knows what other surprises the Premier League has in store. One thing's for sure, we'll be here to break it all down.
I love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this amazing Chelsea-Tottenham match. We hope you guys enjoyed it. But remember, this is just the start of the conversation. We want to hear your thoughts, your takeaways, what stood out to you. Share it all in the comments. Let's keep this discussion going. Until next time.
Okay, so we've really broken down this Chelsea-Tottenham match, the tactics, the key players, the drama. But like you said, this was more than just a game. The podcast, they even say it sent shockwaves through the Premier League. So, let's talk big picture. What does this win mean for Chelsea's ambitions this season?
It's huge. It's a real statement. Remember, at the start, we talked about Chelsea chasing Liverpool at the top of the table.
Yeah.
Well, this win, it keeps them right there in the mix. The podcast, they actually have a graphic showing. Chelsea are now only 4 points behind.
Wow, so closing that gap, it's definitely doable. But it's not just about the points, right? Beating a rival like Tottenham, especially after being down 2-0, that's got to do wonders for their confidence. Absolutely, this could be a real turning point for them. They showed that resilience, tactical flexibility, and just a real hunger to win. The commentator even said, this is a Chelsea team that believes they can win the title.
Wow.
And after a performance like that, it's hard to disagree.
So Chelsea are on a high. But looking at the other side, what does this loss mean for Tottenham? They came in looking to solidify that top 4 spot. And now...
It's a blow. Definitely a blow. Their defensive frailties, they were exposed. And those early goals, they really hurt. The podcast analysis, they suggest that Postecoglou might be feeling the pressure. Remember that stubbornness with his tactics we talked about?
Oh, yeah.
That could come under some serious scrutiny now.
I could see that. Sticking to your principles is admirable. But there are times you need to adapt, especially against a team like Chelsea. The podcast also mentions Tottenham have some tough fixtures on the horizon.
Oh, yeah, they do.
So can they bounce back from this?
It's going to be a real test of their character. They've got the talent, no doubt, but they got to tighten up that defense and maybe, just maybe, be a bit more pragmatic, The podcast, those pundits, they think this loss could derail their whole season if they're not careful.
Wow. Okay, so we've looked at the impact on both teams. But zooming out even further, what does this match tell us about the Premier League in general?
I think it's a reminder that this league, it's unpredictable.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone can beat anyone on any given day. We came into this thinking, oh, Tottenham might just run away with it after that fast start.
I know, right?
But then Chelsea, they changed the whole narrative. That's what makes the Premier League so great. The twists, the turns, the stories that come out of nowhere.
Exactly. That's why we love it. Honestly, after this deep dive, I'm even more excited to see how the rest of the season plays out. Can Chelsea keep this momentum going? Challenge for the title? Will Tottenham regroup, get that top 4 finish? So many questions.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
It is.
We get to watch it all unfold. Who knows what other surprises the Premier League has up its sleeve? But one thing's for sure, we'll be here to break it all down for you.
That's right, we will. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into this incredible Chelsea-Tottenham match. Hope you all enjoyed it. But remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Let us know your thoughts, your takeaways, what stood out to you. Head over to the comments. Let's keep talking about this one. Until next time.